So good evening, everyone, and welcome. My name is Valerie, and I work at Fireside as a bookseller, and I'm also your Zoom host tonight. So Lori is also here, and she's the co-owner of Fireside. Hi, Lori.
Hello. Jean Butler is my partner, and she's out there somewhere watching us, I know.
Oh, hi, Jean. Okay.
Before we begin with Connie's presentation, I'm just going to go over a little bit about how to ask her questions during the presentation. You can ask at any time, and then when we do the Q&A portion, we'll read them out loud, and then Connie will respond. So if you just look at the bottom of your screen, there's a tab that says Q&A. You'll just click that. A window will open, and it will have a prompt like ask a question. You just type into the window whatever question you have, and it will enter a queue of questions for me to read. So we'll address your questions like in the order they come in, I guess. And it should be super simple, and hopefully nobody has a problem. So when we get to the Q&A portion, that's how that will go. And you're greatly encouraged to ask questions, so please feel free to type.
Yes, please.
Whatever questions you have. And it is my pleasure to introduce to you our guest, who is Connie Schultz. And as many of you already know, she's been a journalist. She was a journalist at the Plain Dealer for many, many years. And she's also a Pulitzer Prize winner. She's a memoirist and now a novelist with her first work of fiction, The Daughters of Erietown, which is a multi-generational family saga about, I thought it was about the secrets we choose to keep and how they kind of shape our lives. So really enjoyed this book. I hope everyone else listening
very much so, yes.
Thank you.
So Connie's going to go ahead and read some excerpts from it, not too long, so we don't put anyone to sleep. And, then we're going to turn it over to the Q&A.
Let me just interrupt quickly to say that Thursday when I was doing the New York Times bestseller list, Connie's book popped up at number 15, which was so exciting. So that's really great.
Yeah, really cool.
That was an exciting call to get from my editor in the debut week of the novel.
I'm sure. Wow.
And I was laughing what Valerie said, because I had said to Valerie had said at first, well, why don't you read for 40, 45 minutes? I said, I've never wanted to sit through that long of a reading, and I can't imagine anybody else does. But I'll read a couple short segments from my book, and then I would like to immediately get into the questions. But I also just want to thank Lori. Lori reached out early to do this. She was one of the first booksellers to do this. And that's why we got her on the schedule pretty quickly. It may not have felt like it at first, Lori, but you actually did get on it pretty quickly.
It was great, yeah.
You're moved to the front of the line pretty quickly. And Valerie, for doing all that you're doing. I so appreciate all this. And for all of you willing to tune in like this, I'm sorry I'm not going to see you in person right now. That day will come. This is not our forevermore. I am certain of that, but it is certainly where we are right now. And I was waving a moment because as soon as Valerie started talking, of course, the dog started barking. So we'll see if Franklin and Walter participate or not. I'd like them to just cooperate, but we'll see how that goes. All right. The first segment I want to read is pretty early in the book, when Sam is describing how her friend had encouraged her. I mean, we're reading about how her friend Val had encouraged Sam to go ahead and apply to Smith College, even though Valerie had become pregnant and could no longer fulfill that dream, which had been her dream as well. Val wouldn't let up on her, badgering her to fill out the application and even editing her essay. To Sam's shock, Smith College offered her a full ride. Her father killed the deal. You know what this is, he said, waving the admission letter. Charity, pure and simple. They feel sorry for you. It's a full scholarship, Dad. They said they liked my essay. They said I had great potential. That's rich people talk for pity. What they mean is they'll get to show you off like a prize monkey. Sam squeezed her eyes shut, willing herself not to cry. But it's free, Dad. It's where I want to go. Sam, nothing worth having is free. They'll own you for the rest of your life. No matter what you accomplish, it will never feel like you did it on your own because you owe that school something you can't ever pay back. Well, we'll owe money if I go to Kent State, Sam said. You wouldn't even let me apply for a federal grant. And what did you learn after you went behind my back and did it anyway? She shrugged. Answer me. What did they tell you? I didn't qualify, Sam said softly. Rick shook his head. That's right. You didn't qualify because I make too much money. Your old man may work in maintenance at Erietown Electric, but I still make too much money for you to go to college for free. That's who you come from. Don't you ever forget that. We'll still have the student loan, Sam said, that we'll pay back with interest, Rick said. That's how it works. Sam gave it one last try. They killed 4 students there. Rick shrugged. That was 5 years ago, and they haven't killed one since. You'll be fine. He walked over to her and squeezed her shoulder. Don't worry, kid. Kent State is a great college with no strings attached. That's why your mother got her job, so we could afford this. Until then, Sam's mother had been sitting silently on the sofa. Ellie cleared her throat and said, that's not why. She waved her hand and stood up. Never mind. And that was the end of it. The next morning, Sam stepped on the lever to open the flip top of the kitchen trash can and saw Smith's acceptance letter crumpled and covered in bacon grease. Now, well into the book, towards the last part of the book, Sam initiates a conversation finally with her mother, asking about this long and often complicated marriage that she's witnessed between her parents. Mom, why did you put up with it? Why didn't you leave? Ellie looked down at her lap for a moment, then turned to face Sam. We want to think there are rules in life, that as long as we follow them, everything will be all right. And then God blows up your plans, blows them to smithereens. And you're left picking up the pieces and putting your life back together as best as you can, because it's not about you. It's about your children and the life you built, and not giving everyone a reason to see you as damaged goods for the rest of your life. I'm sorry, Mom, I shouldn't have brought it up. No, I'm glad you did, Ellie said. This has been hanging over us for years. She turned to face the front and took a deep breath. I need to say something else, Sam. It might help you, I think. Sam looked at her. What is it? It's what I've learned about grief, Ellie said. Not just grief after a death, but the grief you can feel after something rocks your world. Grief is that monster that bangs at your door until you let it in and sit with it for a while. When you get bored with each other, the monster leaves. Sam relaxed her foot on the gas pedal and the car started to slow. I never thought of it that way. How long does it stay, the monster? That's not the question, honey. It's how long does it take you to answer the door and let it in? That's where the pain is. You have to open the door. You can always tell the people who won't. Shows up in their faces over time. The longer they wait, the longer the monster stands in their way, blocking all the good trying to find them. How'd you get to be so smart, Mom? Ellie shrugged. I've opened my share of doors, I guess. And that is that. That is the reading portion of our book. Valerie, I can't hear you. Now I can. Okay.
I can't hear you.
Valerie, you're muted.
I muted it so you couldn't hear any background noise.
Could you mute my dogs, please?
Lori and I were talking right before you came on, and it's funny because I thought the main character of the story was Ellie, and she thought it was Sam. So we're kind of interested in who you consider to be the main character of this book.
Well, my editor would agree with Lori. And especially during the revision process, she said the readers are going to care most about Sam. I felt pretty strongly that the readers were also going to care a lot, I hoped, would care a lot about Ellie. And so it's not surprising to me. I keep getting that mixed review from readers who think they're cheering on Ellie or they're cheering on Sam. Many times they're cheering on both of them, of course. But
yeah,
I think it's up to the reader what you perceive it to be. Who you end up caring most about, I think, determines who you think it's about.
Well, that's cool. So it's, reader interpretation.
Yeah.
So we have a couple of questions. We also have someone who raised their hand. Do you want to allow them to talk and ask a question?
I'm open if you are.
Sure.
That's up to It's your program.
Okay, we'll see what happens. So Phyllis Nelson had a hand raised. Do you want to talk, Phyllis? Well, I don't know if that.
They have to unmute themselves, is that
So
right?
yeah, exactly. Phyllis, you'll have to unmute your speaker.
Oh. Are you there, Phyllis? Well, I hear something.
Mm-hmm. Do you have a question, Phyllis?
So maybe we should move on to a written one.
Let's move
and maybe we
on.
can come back to Phyllis.
I actually have a couple that came in today. Do you want me to start with those?
Sure, whatever you want.
So the first one is from, I don't know if I should say your name, but Signo Rolstad Forbes. And she says, thank you for this opportunity. When you begin writing a novel, do you start with a basic story and characters and watch the story evolve as you write it? Or do you have a distinct plan from the start?
Yes and yes. You think you have a distinct plan. At least initially, I was going to show you something. So this is my very old now, Erietown initial outline. And I deliberately had something that could fit in my purse so I could carry it with me everywhere I went. But it's not your standard, it's a Moleskine, but it's not your standard pages. It's like, it's the accordion, which apparently has been sold out. I made the mistake of mentioning it on social media the other day, but I'm told it will be coming back into stock everywhere. What I love about this is that it lets me create a timeline and keep adding to it, but also I can see it laid out. Like I could spread this entire thing across our old oak table downstairs, and it was helpful for me to figure out where my gaps were, or where I wanted to introduce something new, or if I was really struggling in the course of a section of the book, what's missing here? What happened before? What happened? It could happen after. It's very hard for me to imagine it when I've just got pages. If I can look at a graphic, it helps me a lot. And I've just started one for my next novel, because you think you have an idea. Like, for example, those of you who've read the book will know what I'm talking about. I don't want to give away anything for those who haven't, about that knock on the door. And originally, my book started with that, because that's where the whole idea for the book came. And when I had first talked to my editor, Kate Medina, when she was really pushing me to write this novel, I said, I just keep thinking about this knock at the door. And she said, start there. Well, as it turned out, she felt I gave away too much of the book by starting it. So it ends up moving to the middle, more than the middle. And the preface to the book, I waited until the entire book was written before I wrote that, because I had to really know the whole story to decide how much I wanted to foreshadow and who would be the best person for the foreshadowing. And I decided that had to be Sam, because Sam would be that next generation, right? So it is such a work in progress in that way. There are certain things that started from the very beginning. I always knew how certain characters would die. I always knew that Ellie at some point was going to make a list of her job duties as a nurse's aide, because my sisters found my mother's list. My mom was a nurse's aide, and found that list by my mother after she had died. And we don't know why she made it. We don't know why there are copies for everyone in the family. That haunts me. I wish I could have talked to her about it. I think she probably didn't think we knew much about her job and why it mattered to her. But I used a portion of it in my book, and it becomes Ellie's story, but it starts as my mother's. So there are these little moments that I always knew would be in it, but so much of it, you just don't know until the characters start rattling that cage in your head every day, and you just got to keep going.
So how long did it take you to write the book? I can't even imagine, going through it, doing what you've done. I mean, how long did it take?
Well, it was started, really and truly, the conversations with Kate Medina started a decade ago.
Okay.
But in the last 5 years is when I got, part of it was, I really wish I'm going to go close that door. Hold on one second, everybody. I'm sorry, but I am. We call it doggies at the movies. They sit in the front window and bark at everybody walking their dogs after dinner. It started to take better shape once I started to take myself seriously as a novelist. I have been a journalist for more than 30 years. And I wasn't one of those journalists that always wanted to write fiction. I couldn't believe I got paid to be a writer. I'm a working class kid. I was the first in my family to go to college. Once I started taking myself seriously, that something changed and I really got serious about the discipline, because there is no writing a book without the discipline of a writer. So, and I have other things I do in my life. I'm a columnist. I teach as a professional in residence at my alma mater at Kent. I'm a senator's wife, an unpaid job that is very demanding sometimes, in all good ways, but it's just a public life. And so I had to decide, I had to take it seriously, which meant I had to decide when I was going to commit to this virtually every day. So I'm not a morning person in terms of, I don't get up and like Sharon and I'm ready to chat and talk and oh my gosh, but I am somebody who gets up every morning very early. And so I started having that particular discipline because I found that I do my best writing typically early in the morning. And I would go into my sunroom after having, I'd have coffee, a little bit of breakfast, take another mug of coffee to the table, and I'd light a tea light, a tea candle. And for the time that it would burn, which is between 3 and 4 hours, I would make myself write. Some days felt really productive. Some days ended up feeling like pretty much a waste of time in some ways, except I know this about it. Writing begets writing begets writing. And so even if I had a bad writing day, I kept going. And another tip I would give any writers out there, especially those aspiring to write a book, it really helps if you end knowing where you're going to pick up the next day, if you have an idea of where the book goes next. And that was advice I got years ago. And it's been very helpful to do that, because that way you're a little more eager to get to the table again or get to the writing desk.
Sure. All right, so you pretty much answered Judy Birdsall's question, which is, she says, I really like the storyline. Did you know ahead of time how it was going to all turn out, or did it reveal itself as it went along? So you totally answered that.
It had 4 different endings before we finally
really?
landed on the one that, yeah. And Kate Medina again had some really good advice. She said the first ending, I liked it a lot. I'd always thought it was going to be the ending, but it was too sad. There had to be more hope in it than that, because the characters deserved. I mean, the 2 of the main characters, Ellie and Sam, they had reasons to be hopeful, and it needed to, and so I had to work harder on that part, but I'm really glad I did. So, it's why I always tell my students, revise, revise, revise. Fortunately, I love writing. I'm not one of those writers who complains about it a lot. I really love writing. It's hard work, but not compared to what my parents did for a living, for example, not compared to essential workers. It's not hard work. And I love the process of revision. That's when you hope to bring the art to the page more. You get your first draft out, which tamps down your anxiety as a writer. And then you start to decide what you keep, what goes out, you get some new ideas. And the thing is about writing every day is it keeps the story in your head, so that even when you're not thinking about it, your mind keeps working for you. I long lost count of the number of times I would wake up in the morning and I would have resolved an issue of tension, or I would have figured out something a character needs to be doing. Something happened overnight. You got to let your mind work for you.
You have to turn yourself on, Valerie. We can't hear you.
Sorry, I know. So I can go ahead and ask some of the Q&A queue that's been piling up here.
Okay.
So our first comment is from Rosemary Weltman, and she says, I grew up in Cleveland. I was a principal in Shaker Heights, so your book was so relatable to me. And my name is Rosemary. I follow you on Facebook. Please accept my praise for your spectacular book. So
wow, thank you.
Less of a question, more of a comment. But
I love Shaker. I was a single mom for a decade in Shaker. I had somebody take me to task the other day and said, they're not all rich people in Shaker. And I said, of course not. I lived there for a decade. I was one of the ones who wasn't rich. But when you are a working class kid and you're dating a guy from Shaker in the 1970s, Shaker is definitely a rich place compared to what you're used to. And he conceded that point. So we ended up agreeing.
Let me talk about Shaker High School. Olivia Schwartz, who was one of your daughter's teachers, is with us tonight. And
wonderful.
Yeah, so I just thought you should say hello to her. So.
Hello, Mrs. Schwartz. I always knew her as Mrs. Schwartz, of course, Ms. Schwartz. Caitlin, you'd be so proud of her. She's just, wow. She's advocating for kids at risk. She's in charge of all the daycares, getting any state or federal funding in the state of Rhode Island. And it's been quite a time in this time of coronavirus. I couldn't be prouder of her.
That's great.
Thanks.
So we have another question, and it is from an anonymous attendee. And it says, is this about your life, Connie?
I don't think any novelist can claim that he or she brings nothing of their lives into the work. It's impossible, because fiction's what we make up. But we make up stuff that, I mean, there's a reason I had the excerpt from A Tree Grows in Brooklyn that I included in the front of the book, because in some ways this is the story as I wanted it to be. Certainly there are seeds of truth in it. I've been quoting May Sarton a lot, who was a poet and novelist and had published several journals. And I read a line in one of her journals years ago where she said, oh, perhaps only in fiction can we be totally honest. And if that's the case, this is the truest story I've ever told. But it starts as one thing. Like, I mean, Ellie is a nurse's aide. Brick is a utility worker, which were the professions of my parents. But they are not my parents eventually at all. They become very different people. There are moments in it, of course, like Kent State, where I went. I figured I was the first in my family to go to college, and I knew Sam would be. Kent State was the only experience I could be certain of in the 70s, because that's who I was. So I brought that. I brought the Vietnam War into it, in part because of Kent State, obviously, but also because in my home county of Ashtabula County, which is a small working class town on the shore of Lake Erie, Ashtabula City, we lost 26 boys in that war, and countless others served and came back different. So if I was going to write about this era, I had to be honest about some of the things that happened in it. But then it becomes, the conversations are imaginary for the most part. Sometimes little truths, do seep in. I do remember, until I went to Kent State, I didn't know that there were people who didn't know somebody who had served in the war. And it's when I first became aware of class. And certainly that's an issue in the novel, the issue of class.
Sam's first boyfriend, who I liked a lot.
Henry.
It's been a while since I read it. Henry, yes. I was surprised that didn't work out, but.
Yeah, but Brick was right, I think. If she really had loved Henry, if he was the one for her, she would have fought for him.
Mm-hmm.
And as we all know, Sam has other plans. Much later. Sam's afraid of marriage. Sam's afraid of commitment because of what she's witnessed in her parents' marriage and the secrets that she knows, right? Mm-hmm. She knows more than they do about some of the stuff. And it's obviously affected her over time.
True.
Okay, so we have another question. It says, great book, Connie. Can you comment on the character of Brick? How he was wounded and how it affected his wife and daughter?
Well, Brick grew up in a violent home and lost his only brother in the war, which really affected his mother and made her extremely protective of her son in ways that she really couldn't be protective. It was a very stressful life for him as a child. But one of the things that, that was another thing that changed with Brick. I initially had him be a violent man, like his father. But the more I was talking about with my editor, I could see the argument that readers would like him better if he were. I mean, they want to like him. He's still a very flawed character, but they all are in their own ways. But I thought, if I don't make him violent, I need to make it clear that he is consciously fighting that legacy, because we know this about domestic violence. It tends to go from generation to generation. It has to be a really conscious act, not to continue the legacy of that. And so we have a few moments where Brick has to come full circle and has to acknowledge that he still could have this inclination, but he doesn't want to be that person. And I thought it was very important to show the inner conflict of that. And of course, Brick being Brick, the only person he really confides in a lot is somebody who's been gone a long time, and when he visits her sometimes. I don't want to give too much away, but I've been hearing about that a lot from readers. So I want to acknowledge that I understand for some that has really made them think about either their own lives or somebody they know.
So I thought you did a really great job of not portraying Brick as, a black and white villain character. He did have some bad qualities, but you definitely could sympathize with this character. And I was kind of curious if you think that you extended the same sort of sympathy to Rosemary's character. They're
That
both
certainly was.
tragic characters, you know?
I would agree in their own ways they are. And it was one of the reasons I started with her childhood. I wanted people to understand. I mean, we start when she's a teenager. I wanted readers to understand who she was and what she was trying to run away from and who she was trying to run away from. She really was trying to remake herself, which is the story of so many of us at different times in our lives. She's complicated. She is willful, right? She doesn't always use the best judgment. But she's not unlike people I've known, certainly. And I could never claim to be flawless myself. And I just didn't think it was it would not be a realistic novel if every character didn't also have weaknesses. You know, I hope one of the themes of the book is that everyone is bigger than his or her worst mistake. That people are just more complicated than that.
Yeah, I think the complication definitely comes out. You did a good job with that.
Thank you. I've been writing about complicated people for decades. So.
Okay, so our next question is from, I'm probably going to brutalize this name, but it's Lynn Fagan, maybe? So.
Gian?
Yeah, yep, that's right, Lori. So with the move into fiction, you had to adopt the male voice, the dad. Was that a challenge?
My editor said that after I turned in the first draft, she said the most realized character initially was Brick McGinty. And I think the reason for that, I had to really put some thought into that. I think it's because I was so less sure of myself initially about writing in a male voice that I had to really spend a lot of time with Brick and sort him out. And I know a lot of men like Brick in different ways, and I certainly know a lot of men in organized labor like Brick. You know, this has been my experience growing up and my experience in politics with Sherrod. I mean, and also just my work as a journalist. I've been writing about working class people, and not just white working class people. I can't emphasize enough, and I hope it's clear in the book as well. So it doesn't surprise me that Brick would have been the one I most fully realized as a character first, because in part he is at the center of these three women's lives, but they respond to him in very different ways ultimately. And I wanted to be able to show that as well. I wasn't uncomfortable writing in the male voice. I don't know that I would want to tell an entire story in a male voice, but I feel comfortable about where I landed with Brick.
I think he was really believable. And
thank you.
I really appreciated the part, how he was not violent, how he was able to suppress that. And I like that.
Well, that affirms what my editor was telling me all along. She was wise about that. I mean, because it's the easy thing, I think. I mean, Bull is so clearly not a good man, right? He's just really, and those men exist too. But I loved recently a male friend, a dear friend, said, "Thank you for not making all the guys idiots and jerks." And I thought, well, why would I? Not all men are idiots and jerks. I know that. We're not interested in that story.
That's funny.
So we've got another question from Dorothy Valerian. She said, "I could hear the story as I read it. You were so skillful in creating the conversations. They seem natural and authentic. So is this a learned skill or an innate one?"
Well, I would never claim an innate ability to do anything particularly talented. I think it's something I had to learn. I had the advantage of doing several narrative series in journalism, narrative journalism, when I was at the Plain Dealer. One of them, some of your readers might remember, was Losing Lisa, which chronicled the last few months in a young mother's life, and then a full year in her family's life after she died. She left behind 3 young boys, and that ran in 1998. And then I did a number of others, including Aaron's Race, and also the Michael Green series in 2003, which was about a Black man named Michael Green who had gone to prison for 13 years for a rape he didn't commit. It was called The Burden of Innocence. So all of those, especially once I was working for my editor, Stuart Warner, who really was a taskmaster on narrative journalism, narrative journalism is taking the fiction writer's tools to tell a nonfiction story. So you learn a lot about foreshadowing. You learn a lot about dialogue and how to use it. Anything you didn't witness, you have to reconstruct it by talking to everybody there. And his rule was you can never break that wall. They can't all of a sudden just be talking to the reporter in the story. I had to make it a strict narrative. So in that way, I had a lot of good training support. And it was after I wrote my second book, which was about Sherrod's Senate race and his lovely wife, that the publisher and my editor at Random House took me to lunch in 2007 and said, they mentioned dialogue in particular, because most journalists are born storytellers. So we're always recounting what other people say, right? And we're recounting conversations. And they thought that was a good place for me to start. They thought that the working class was really underrepresented in modern literature. I absolutely agree with that. That is a fact. They thought I could do something about it. That I wasn't convinced of right away. But I'm really glad for Kate Medina wouldn't let me go. She just would not get her claws out of me. And so my agent, Gail.
She was your editor for all 3 books?
All 3 books.
Okay.
And she came after me too. She came after me the day after the Pulitzers to do the first book, which she was relentless. She would just leave messages. You need to call me. You're going to want to talk to me. And when I realized it was Kate Medina, when you win the Pulitzer as a columnist, it's a little different. At least back then, this was 2005, and I had kept track of it. I had more than 20 literary agents call me. But when I knew it was Kate Medina, that was the call I returned. And I'm really glad I did. And my agent, Gail Ross, came to me, wanted to represent me several years ago. And oh my gosh, she would see me on Facebook. She would say, don't ever give up Facebook. Don't give up your column. But if she'd see me too much on Facebook, she'd send me a text. Why the F are you on Facebook? You're supposed to be writing. And now both of them, all they're saying, every good news call they make, they always end with, especially Kate Medina, I certainly hope you're writing right now, click. So they are tough, and they're exactly what I need. And you made me think of, I was thinking of my agent when you mentioned Brick, because at one point when Gail was reading my draft, she called me up and she said, I am so mad at Brick right now. I like him, I liked him, and he just keeps screwing up, and I'm really upset with him right now. And I thought, this is perfect. That's what you want. She's talking about him like he's a real guy. So I have these 2 great women involved. There's just no way I'm not, I wasn't going to figure out how to get this done.
That's great.
That's great. So Cindy Reagan says, as a teacher, I'm curious, do you think writing a novel helped or will help you in teaching your journalism course?
I think it's worked both ways. I think teaching journalism, teaching writing, it really helped me finish my novel, because it was the first time I'd spent so much time talking about the craft of writing. And you start to know what you know in a way that you didn't before. At least for me, that was the experience. I also didn't want to be the hypocrite. I tell my students all the time, if you're never scared, you've stopped growing. So the thing that was most keeping me back, I think, was fear of failure on the novel. And I finally came to understand, I remember saying to Sherrod one night, my only regret here will be if I don't finish it. And so if indeed you have to be scared, if you're going to keep growing, I must really be having a growth skirt, because I am terrified much of the time. Although it's been received so well. It's really helped a lot, and the reviews have been wonderful.
They have been wonderful, yes.
And I feel so grateful for that. But I don't kid myself for a moment. I am on the bestseller list because of the readers and the independent booksellers. Those are the 2 groups. Random House has this incredible team. And of course, I want to acknowledge that as well. But this would not be happening without independent booksellers all over the country and without readers. And I'm so grateful. I will always have a soft spot for Cleveland area readers, because you launched my career for me in Cleveland. I would not have had that column. I would not have had the ability to write about so many different issues and talk to so many different people over the years, were it not for the Cleveland readers who kept asking for more. And I can't respond to every email I'm getting and every private message on Twitter and Facebook, but please know I'm reading them all. I am so touched by it all. And I'm glad for the opportunities to be able to say that, because I'm sorry I can't respond to everyone, but please never doubt that I appreciate the feedback, and that I especially appreciate the support.
Okay, so I have a question. So when coronavirus started and everything shut down, a lot of books pushed their publication dates way out. And
Yeah.
I wondered if you might do the same. And I think it was really smart of you not to. And I'm just wondering, was that a hard decision? Did you even consider moving it, or?
I had waited so long for this book to come out. Of course, I was really nervous about it coming out now with everything going on, but Random House didn't waver. I know that a number of nonfiction books were pushed back by the various publishing houses, but what they were seeing, and this was their instinct, and it ended up being right, that adult fiction right now, the numbers are strong. People are reading.
They are.
And I wasn't sure that would, I mean, part of it was my own anxiety because I was having a hard time reading fiction. And I love fiction. I've been reading fiction all of my adult life. And from the time I could read, regular books on my own, I've been reading fiction. And I was having trouble concentrating. But I also understand I'm a columnist. I'm married to a United States Senator. There's a lot that we're thinking about every day because of what's going on in the world. And we're trying to, there's so many people who need help right now. So I started to tell myself that I have to remember what I've always said to my readers: don't assume what you think or what you're experiencing is everyone's story. That is number one point to always remember as a journalist, and certainly as a columnist. And I've been so moved by the number of people who've told me that the Daughters of Erietown has been their first book back, that they could actually read it and keep going. And oh my gosh, that means so much to me. I am blown away by that, to be honest with you, because we didn't know how this was going to go. Random House was pretty excited when the New York Times list came out last week. Nobody was predicting that one, let me tell you. So, I mean, they were hopeful, but not in the first week. We just didn't know how this was going to go. So,
well, I can relate to that in a way. I am a really slow reader. And this book is like 500 pages.
Yeah,
or maybe more, I don't know. But I read it in 2 days. That's how compelling the narrative is. So I think you did a great job.
I think I'm going to hear that someday and not feel emotional about it. But, I turned in 100. I don't know why it never occurred to me to ask or even think about how long is a novel typically, right? I didn't think I turned in 197,000 words. And Kate Medina, bless her heart, one of the first things she gently said was, well, it's a little bit long. The average novel is 110,000 words. But, oh my God, I have so much to cut. So we ended up with 122,000. So it was a little bit longer than your typical novel. I didn't have to fight for the words. I mean, they really make your case, tie up the story, cut like crazy. The cuts did not hurt. I am convinced of that now. It helps to be a journalist used to having to cut. Every column is too long and I have to cut it before I hit send. Every column I write every week. So that's been helpful, I think, as training. But there's nothing like writing a novel. I mean, my favorite definition I ever heard, description of column writing, is to be a columnist is to sit under the windmill and you get hit in the head and you think, God, that's over. And then it just keeps coming and coming. Yes, it's true. You just get so used to meeting the deadlines,
So we have a question from Janice, and it says, in addition to writing professionally, do you journal or write letters to family members? Some of my she has a little bit more. Some of my most treasured personal items are letters my uncle, a newspaper editor in North Carolina, has written to me.
Well, I love letter writing. I don't keep journals as often as I should, even though I'm always telling my students right now that they should, because they will be the storytellers of this pandemic, the young adults in particular who will remember this. But I actually, I did a post recently on social media where I bought a number of those old toast racks, like you see in the old movies, and the British use them a lot, and their toast is upright. And I use them for my stationery all through the house. So that as soon as I think of writing a note to someone, I pick it up and I write it now. And it's got stamps there and I can put the stamps on it. I'm a big fan of personal. I just mailed a bunch today. Well, of course, right now I'm writing so many out of gratitude, right? There are just so many people to be thanking. But I love handwritten notes. And my daughter is a great letter writer. She tends to put pen to paper and write nice little notes, and she has the kids doing it already. What I worry about for so many families is without the handwritten notes, there's going to be so much loss because we're not archiving emails, right? Very few of us. And if I get an email that really matters to me, I print it. I have a separate folder because I want that record. I want to remember it because it's the same with pictures. My photographer friends for years now have been saying this, so I do it now. I love to shoot. I'm an amateur, but I love to take pictures, and I print them regularly, the ones I want to keep. We think we'll always have them in the cloud, so I have a lot of frames around the house. Probably the same idea as the letter writing. I like the physical evidence of my life and my gratitude, which is what my notes are. I want people to understand how grateful I am for them. And it's a good practice for me. And also just when people are going through tough times, because I certainly have saved those notes in my rough patches. And I'm never doing enough, but I'm trying to do more of that now. And I love my little toast racks all around the house. Those antiques, the vintage racks, mostly from the 50s and 60s, holding my note cards.
That's fun.
So we have a question from one of our employees at Fireside here. It's Suzanne, and she wants to know, She says, many of the folks who came into the shop to purchase the book lamented that they missed your columns in the Plain Dealer. So where can we read your columns now?
Well, I'm sorry the Plain Dealer doesn't run them. They never have since I left. I can count on one hand the times I have. I don't know why. I've never really had an explanation for it. But my columns can be found online. If you just Google my name and Creator Syndicate, I think even if you just Google my name, they probably come up. But they're all at Creator Syndicate. Thank you for asking. And I also share them typically on Facebook and on Twitter every week when they come out. And depending on where you live, even in Ohio, there are some papers that run, including the Lyric Chronicle, and there are papers around the country, but the easiest way to find it is online. And I appreciate your asking.
We have a question from Hannah, and it says, what is your favorite book or a book that has inspired you?
Oh, that list is too long. I appreciate the question. A Tree Grows in Brooklyn is significant for me, which of course is why I excerpted in my book. In large part because it was the first time, and I read it as a young girl, that I saw myself reflected in its pages and in its story, because it was about a family that wasn't rich. And it was a smart working class girl, which, you know, I remember getting into an argument, many arguments before, you know, when you win prizes, it really starts to insulate you from some of these. But before that, you get called, I likened it being called into the principal's office a lot when I started writing my column. And at one point, the editor said, Connie, you are not, this is not Stuart Warner, you are not the working class, you are an intellectual. And I said, well, if I'm an intellectual from the working class. And we have smart people too. See, the dogs are barking their agreement immediately. The difference between me and so many of with my roots is I had the chance to go to college, and it changed the trajectory of my life. And I had someone very early believe in me as a writer and as a journalist, and that changed my life. So I can feel pretty defensive pretty quickly when someone tries to depict us as something other than that. This book, the narrative arc of this book in part is working class people have hopes and dreams and ambitions too, especially for their children. The difference is when the big problems come and there's no money to fix them, and then everything derails. But that doesn't mean they give up on their kids. And in fact, they may invest, some may say inflict their dreams onto their children. And for those lucky enough to go to college, like I did, you will straddle two worlds for the rest of your life. You don't want to forget where you came from, but you've also seen the world in a different way, and you've had access to a world that they've been denied. And I wanted to show that tension in the story of the Daughters of Erietown.
I think it definitely comes across in your book.
Good.
Yeah. We have one from Tracy, and she says, I am just starting the Daughters of Erietown. I'm very excited to read it. However, my questions are about the next novel you mentioned. Can you share what it will be about? Is it a sequel or something different? Do you have an estimated timeline about when to expect it?
Oh my God, she's like my editor and my agent, Tracy.
Tracy.
I certainly hope you're writing. It is not a sequel. I don't rule out a sequel, but I really wanted to let Daughters of Erietown have its run and see where it lands with readers. And I certainly have ideas for it. I am leaning towards now having the second, I am working on it. I think it may be in Erietown because Erietown has a lot of different people in it, a lot of different things going on. And I think there's going to be an independent bookstore in it because I love the idea of that in a working class town. You know, I've always had a special place in my heart for independent booksellers. I mean, my daughter, especially my son, was grown. He's 12 years older than Caitlin. Kate and I used to spend a lot of time at the Joseph that's just down the street from where I lived in Shaker. And one of the most moving things I ever saw my daughter do as a mother in recent years, when her son was about 2.5, I heard her say what I always said to her. We were at a bookstore in Providence, in Rhode Island, and he picked up a book and he was smiling. And I know she did this because I was standing there. She goes, you know what, Mila? We always have money for a book. And all my years of single motherhood, that's what I always told her. We always have money for a book. So the loyalty runs long here. But I also just think there's a lot of potential with that because so many women are running bookstores, right? It's not the focus of the piece, but I have to have this woman, this particular grandmother, she's coming to life for me, and she needs to do something a little different in a small town. And I think trying to keep a bookstore afloat would be just the thing. And I think Erietown could really use that bookstore. So I don't know where it's going yet, but I'm excited about it, which is a good feeling because I didn't have an idea right away. And then this one just came for me. And in fact, Sharon and I take very long walks. He's home every weekend. He's driving, not flying back and forth from Washington. And we were walking in the park, and all of a sudden he turned to me and he said, "You did not hear a damn word I just said to you." And I looked at him and I said, "I know what the next book is. I think I know." And I started, and he was as excited as, well, as he's reading my book right now for the 5th time. He's crazy. I love him. He said, "I want to read it in hardback." He's read so many different versions of it. But he's been so supportive, and it really helped me to tell him, so here's what I'm thinking. Here's what I think might happen. Here's where I'm thinking. And his face just lit up, and I thought, I got it. I got the book. And I told my agent right away. I have not told my editor, but I have talked to my agent about it. And she, of course, who knows? Gail just always says, "I love it. I love it. Start writing. Start writing." So that's what I'm doing. So Tracy, I'm not going to tell you anything more than that, but thank you for asking. I'm so glad you're interested. And I hope you enjoy the Daughters of Erietown.
We have Lynn who asks, "I can't imagine you have a great deal of time to relax and read. However, when you do, what do you search for in a book, nonfiction and fiction? And your source, a friend's recommendation or the library or the New York Times bestseller list?"
It's a real combination. I have friends who read. There's a long time book club just down the street, the Wakeholes, I forget, women, I don't remember that, it's an acronym. They meet and they, what is the name of the novel, The Potato Society, that was set in World War II? Do you know what I'm talking?
Potato Peel.
You're getting there.
Literary Society, yeah. Something like that.
Okay, well, this book group is named for that. And what they do is they each talk about whatever books they're reading that that brought them joy in that month. And so I get a lot of ideas on that. Were you going to ask something, Lori?
I like that idea. No, I just think that's a great idea. Yeah.
And it's such a wide range of women reading. But I have writer friends, right? So I'm promoting them. J. Courtney Sullivan has a new novel coming out later this month, I believe, the 30th, right? Next Tuesday, it's coming out. I love her work. I love Amy Bloom. I think White Houses still is White Houses was beautiful. Mary Beth Keane, love her work. I love these young women who are writing. But I read a lot of, my rule for myself is I read policy during the day. I try not to bring it to bed with me. David Gipels has a new book coming out. I just blurbed for him, Barnstorming, Ohio. I highly recommend it. I just finished a blurb for Chasten Buttigieg for his memoir coming out in the fall. And Lee Martin, who many will remember he was a Pulitzer finalist for one of his novels and taught at Ohio State for a number of years. He's got a new memoir coming out soon that I'm writing a blurb for. It is just gorgeous. So I can never have enough books, right? I'm always reading more stuff. Saeed Jones' memoir that came out a few months ago, I highly recommend. I'm also putting more energy into, I've always read authors who are Black and Latino and not, we need more, who are getting published. I'm certainly focusing on that even more. I'm so heartened to see so many readers showing an interest in that work. And I think it's going to result also in more of them getting book deals, which is crucial.
So we have one last question, and it's from Signa. And she says, "I hope this will become a blockbuster movie. And if it does, who will play Ellie, Sam, Rosemary, and Brick?"
I wonder.
This is the parlor game of my friends right now. They are cracking me up. I'm big on Mandy Moore as Ellie, quite frankly, but I'm such a Mandy Moore fan.
I do that.
And I don't know this is totally imaginary. There is no movie coming about. There's been no talk of a movie. This is just how we have fun with that. Brick, I wish that, what's his face from Good Will Hunting? Why am I drawing a blank? Ben Affleck's friend.
Oh, yeah, Matt Damon.
Yeah, I think he would be good as Brick later, but he's not probably a good young Brick right now, but they can do amazing things. But there's also that actor, I think he's Australian, who played the husband in The Loving, the white man married to the Black woman in the big Supreme Court decision. The movie came out a couple of years ago. And I thought, when I first saw him, I thought, oh my God, he's Brick McGinty. So obviously I'm having fun playing this ridiculous game as well. But again, there is no movie deal. There has been no speculation. We're just having fun with it right now. Readers are letting me know who they think should be playing people. I have no idea about Sam yet. Maybe Mandy is Sam, come to think of it. Because she can play young so well. But I'm just such a This Is Us fan. And I'm so attached to her that who knows, right? I mean, who knows? Rosemary, man, there's something. There's fun. Oh, and Martin Sheen could be the grandfather, but he's a dear friend. So of course I want. So basically, I just want to pick my friends and the people I love watching in movies. So that's really not a good formula for deciding who's going to play any role. And I haven't talked to Martin about it at all, but he does have the book. So you never know.
So we've reached the end of the questions, as far as I can tell.
There
Lori,
are some chats. I see 3 chats. Do you know what that means?
It looks like somebody entered into the chat one of the questions, but she corrected herself and put it in.
Got it. Okay.
The other ones were from me and another person about something else.
Okay.
It was about Phyllis, who tried to talk earlier, but we couldn't quite get her.
So Phyllis Nelson was the kindergarten teacher for 2 of my daughters. So hi, Phyllis, if you're out there.
Oh, I love the teachers, always.
We have one more question that came up. Oh, it's not a question. It says, not a question, but Connie, you are so natural and honest. We love you and are so lucky to have you in our lives.
Who is that?
Well,
Valerie?
It was anonymous, actually.
Okay.
Oh my goodness. Well, that's, thank you. Look, we're in this together, right? Through all this, and that you all would show up for this instead of an in-person book talk says so much about what you think of this wonderful bookstore, Fireside, first of all, and the people who work there. It says so much about your commitment to literature and to those of us trying to commit it. You're so supportive of authors. I think it also speaks to, we all have a longing right now for the human contact in any way we can get it. And I'm getting so much from having heard from some of you, and Valerie and Lori. It's been wonderful to see you. I really look forward to someday being able to pop in person.
That would be great. We would love it. We look forward.
I promise.
To it.
I will do it.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Connie. What a nice evening. And thank you for spending time with us.
Sure. Thank you. Stay safe, everyone. And wear your mask, everyone.
Yes, wear your mask.
We are protecting one another. Wear your mask.
Yes.
Please.
That's right. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Connie.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Valerie.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.